And now I want to tell you about Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It gives you smart creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone, tablet, or computer and helps you distribute them to all the major platforms like Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, and more. Plus, they help to hook you up with sponsorships like this one, no matter the listener size, which will help you fund your podcast. And best yet, it's free to use. Look, if you've ever had an itch to talk and express yourself about a topic you like, there is no better time than 2020 to do so. I've started 2 podcasts this year alone, including this one, and we use Anchor for each and every episode. So what do you have to lose? Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started making your own podcast today.
Welcome back to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
And tonight we're discussing the 1953 William Wyler classic, Roman Holiday, starring Audrey Hepburn, Gregory Peck, and Eddie Albert. So, as we lead each week, what is your relationship to this film?
I think it's only the second time I'd ever seen it. And first time was about 3 years ago. And I think it was on one of those Friday nights where I was dog-tired and may have nodded off at times during the film. So I had a hard time remembering it until I actually started watching it again. Then I went, oh, yes, I have watched this.
So, this is a movie that the only relationship I had to it outside of I watched it with you that first time and I watched it again with you now this second time. But all of the relationship I have to this film is through everybody else's work. So Gregory Peck, knowing him from To Kill a Mockingbird and Gentleman's Agreement, knowing Audrey Hepburn for My Fair Lady, knowing Eddie Albert for you obsessively watching TV Land early on and being a Green Acres fan, and William Wyler for his other movies, even a couple that we've kind of generally discussed so far on this.
You forgot one of Audrey Hepburn's greatest films, Breakfast at Tiffany's.
I didn't forget it. I haven't seen it.
Oh, well, it is one of her better films. If you can overlook Mickey Rooney playing a Japanese man in a completely racist portrayal.
Yeah, that's going to be probably one of our least classic movies for that particular role. I mean, yeah. That's going to potentially ruin the entire movie. Not to mention that he got a acting nomination for doing that.
Yes.
So, one of the worst black marks on the Academy Awards. Anyway, so back to this movie. Yeah, all of my relationship to it is through other things. Even, I guess this movie gained a certain level of additional notoriety here not too long ago because we had the movie Trumbo come out, and this was widely discussed as part of that film. There was a retroactive Academy Award given to Dalton Trumbo that his widow collected on his behalf in the late 80s, early 90s, I think. And, the history surrounding this production as him being a part of it. If you haven't seen the movie, I would recommend that you kind of watch it. I mean, it's at least worth a viewing. Bryan Cranston does a good job playing him, and all that was going on, because there's a lot surrounding the whole blacklist era of Hollywood that they still haven't really dealt with or really touched on, because Hollywood is not great at being self-aware most of the time. But
really, the blacklist didn't get to be of significance until Woody Allen did a film in the 70s, and I cannot remember the name of the film, but everybody who wrote it with Woody Allen or starred in it had been blacklisted, and the co-star was Zero Mostel. And so everybody in there had been blacklisted, including Zero Mostel. And the whole idea of the film was to bring to light all of this talent in Hollywood that was banned for no reason than just supposed political subversion.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that one, but that might be something. Although I'm a touch and go on Woody Allen movies, depending on which one. I haven't seen all of them, but there are some I like, there are some I don't care for, and that seems to be most people's opinion. But I'm sure we'll get to at least his most famous one at some point. So,
we ask our good friend from Minnesota to
do you think you're going to be able to stomach his opinions on the movie?
I don't mind the movie.
He's going to be so aggressive about the whole thing. It's just going to be him and I going back and forth yelling at each other.
Well, that would be worth the entertainment.
I suppose it would make an interesting podcast. Anyway, I guess we can, because we'll get into that on another date. So anyway, yet again, back to this movie. So for our next normal plot line, but just the quick overview of the movie. Overwhelmed by her suffocating schedule, touring European princess Anne, played by Audrey Hepburn, takes off for a night while in Rome. When a sedative she took from her doctor kicks in, however, she falls asleep on a park bench and is found by an American reporter, Joe Bradley, played by Gregory Peck, who takes her back to his apartment for safety. At work the next morning, Joe finds out Anne's regal identity and bets his editor he can get an exclusive interview with her, but romance soon gets in the way. So, we'll go quickly. So this film was nominated for Best Picture that year. It did not win. I'm trying to remember what won in 53. I can't remember offhand, but director for William Wyler, supporting actor for Eddie Albert, screenplay, art direction, cinematography, and film editing. It won for Best Actress for Audrey Hepburn, story for Dalton Trumbo, and costume design. It is recognized by the AFI as the #4 romantic comedy of all time, and it was a 1999 National Film Registry submittee. So,
I believe the wardrobe was Edith Head.
Yes, you are correct.
Yeah, I think Edith Head had like something like 11 Academy Awards or something like that. I think she just like completely dominates that category.
Kind of the same way John Williams dominated the musical categories.
Yeah.
So, all right. What is this movie about?
Well, it's about... It's a combination. I mean, it's in some ways the story of a reporter trying to get the story. It's also the story of how young people, especially in something like royalty, are thrust into positions where they have to act and behave in a certain way and sacrifice their childhood. And so she wants to just experience life as a normal person for a while. And ultimately, Gregory Peck, Joe Bradley, figures this out and realizes that he can't manipulate, or not really manipulate, what's the term I'm looking for? Take advantage of the situation for his own personal gain.
So, this might be the one where we've kind of been the farthest apart so far. Usually you and I have kind of closer ones. I said it was the personal struggle between life, love, and responsibility. I think especially the best part of this movie is probably the last half an hour. And the parts that it delves into, like the rest of it is fun and it's cute and whatever else. But when you really start to dig into the themes or that last half an hour, it's a 2-hour film, but where, she needs to go back. He doesn't want her to, but understands, and they come to kind of a mutual understanding of we all have our roles to play in the world, and unfortunately, that means that we can't have the things that we want all the time. We have to submit to a certain level of responsibility of the roles we have to play.
Okay. All right. By the way, the film that won that year was just a little film, From Here to Eternity.
Yes, that's the movie Sarah and I started watching last week. Then Sarah got too tired, and it expired off of TCM.
Well, that's too bad.
Not a bad year for movies. Most of the years of the 50s had some pretty great years. So
there's a hilarious version of it, a parody that was done by Sid Caesar on Show of Shows with Carl Reiner playing the part that was Frank Sinatra, and the part that was why am I drawing a blank as to the main actor in the film? Anyway, Montgomery Clift was played by Sid Caesar. It's hilarious.
Yeah, I could actually buy that. They kind of aren't too far apart in looks.
So,
all right. So, who is your best performer?
Audrey Hepburn.
Yeah. All right. So why?
She portrayed herself. She was able to portray herself in a dichotomy throughout the film: innocent but worldly, beautiful but common. Inquisitive but reserved. I mean, she just had this knack for, portraying herself in two very different lights almost simultaneously.
So I absolutely agree with that pick. I don't think this is Wyler's best film. He's got so many other great ones. I mean, this is our back-to-back Wyler discussion. I didn't even realize it when I started picking these, that that was a part of it. We did Best Years of Our Lives last week. I mean, he's still got Ben-Hur in his cinema or filmography, I guess is the word.
Yes.
But Hepburn absolutely knocks everybody else out of the way through most of this picture. Other than the portions where she's sleeping and Peck is starting to do some levels of physical comedy around her, her level of charisma completely outshines him. She dominates every single scene that she is in this movie through just a certain charismatic aura that cannot be beat. There is an almost intangible quality to everything she does in this movie that makes you almost adore her. And for the sake that, this isn't her first movie overall. This was just her first American movie. But to find her out of literally nowhere and catapult her into superstardom, I think this is probably by far her best performance. Every other one is kind of trying to relive this certain glitter or glimmer of charisma. And, it's tough when, the first big one out, or the first break you get is, the big or the best thing you do. So.
You mean like Orson Welles?
Or Citizen Kane was not his first movie.
It was his first major film. I mean,
define major. He'd made studio films.
Okay.
Anyway, it was the first one where you got complete control. But that was the first one anybody got complete control. So, all right, best minor performance.
Eddie Albert.
You and I, we're going to have to find somebody that, has a different opinion. You and I agree way too frickin' much.
I don't know. He was a charmer throughout the film.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely. He's just, for a movie that, first off, Gregory Peck, it might be one of the most handsome leading men of any period, let alone this one. He just that jawline and that like quiet strength and confidence that he seems to have. I would put him against just about everybody that you can possibly name as like a star. I don't care whether that's Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen had different intangibles. I'd put him above Cary Grant. There's just a certain level of thing, but he got outplayed by two other just grade A performances.
yes.
Albert, he's not in the film a ton, but every time he is, it's almost a great comedic effect. Like all the physical humor that the two of them go through every time Peck is trying to stop Albert from like saying something that he doesn't want him to say. All the little things, tipping his chair over, spilling his drink, tripping him, etc. And he just kind of has a natural act to play it up for the camera without it being too much.
When you watch his performance in this, you realize that there's a lot of this that ended up becoming part of the character of Oliver Douglas in Green Acres, because the basic premise of that TV show is he's the sane guy in a world of insanity.
Yeah, it's kind of the fish out of water storyline.
But everybody in the story, including his wife, was insane. And his reaction, borderline exploding because he just can't believe the stupidity around him. But anyway, I just saw a lot of that same character in the film.
All right. I'm pretty sure you can guess who my most charismatic award is, but who was yours?
Audrey Hepburn. And
Yeah.
yours is the same. You've only referred to her as charismatic 4 times during the original statements you're making.
I know, and that's why I don't
count.
mind giving it away, but it's you can't be sucked in any harder by that smile. It's just not possible.
Well, I had, because I did the play My Fair Lady, as you know, in high school. And after the play was over, the cast all got together. Our director, Lauren Sass, told us not to watch the movie before we did the play. But afterwards, we all got together as a cast, and I can't remember whose house, and we watched the play. And I fell in love with Audrey Hepburn at that point in time, because she was just absolutely beautiful and so vulnerable, and there was just everything about her.
That's a great way of putting it. There's just a certain quality that seems accessible because of that.
Yeah,
maybe it's a male thing. Maybe females would have a different aspect to it, but there's just whether that's vulnerability, accessibility, whatever you want to put on it, I still feel it's an intangible quality that just draws you into everything she does, particularly in this movie. So, all right, best scene. So, my nominees include the opening procession line, where she's fidgeting with her shoe, and it falls over. She can't seem to put it back on, but she's trying to greet all these dignitaries. So, number 2, Peck finds Hepburn drugged up in the street.
Okay.
Number 3, Joe lies to his boss, then makes a big discovery.
Okay.
Irving meets Anya.
Okay.
The Mouth of Truth, The Barber Shop, The Barge Fight, and The Final Interview.
For me, it's The Barge Fight.
Okay. Why do you say that?
It's the culmination of the film. It's where she completely lets go of being the princess and becomes the common person. She's going to help protect Joe. He's fighting for her. And it just puts everything. It pits her against her position as royalty. And makes her common at that moment in time. But it's short-lived. She soon realizes that she can't stay in that position.
So I actually had The Final Interview because I think that's the most emotional weight of the entire thing. It's similar to me in the way that La La Land, the last like 15, 20 minutes, is kind of the what could have been era. You know, those certain things that don't always end the way you want them to, that don't have that fairy tale, but you come to a certain understanding. I don't know why that always works for me. It just does. And I think it actually makes this better than just a run-of-the-mill rom-com. That, you know, there were complications to everything that was going on with their meeting and them being friends or whatever else, but ultimately it's borne out by them kind of coming to that understanding in the room outside of everybody else, and then followed up by the fact that Irving gives Anne the pictures because he kind of understands what's going on too. You know, even though he could have had personal gain, he understands the moment.
Yes.
So
I mean, I can't fault you for your selection, but I enjoyed the barge scene more.
Oh no, I get it, and that's a great scene by itself. I think the best part of the movie is that last half hour, and you could have done several parts of that. A scene I didn't have on there, but is kind of that emotional weightiness, is them in the car, him dropping her off to go back to her life, or her basically figuring out how to stand up for herself in her royal duties and start to assert her level of confidence and dominance among the staff who've been basically bossing her around her entire life. You know, both of those have certain elements, and they weren't on my initial list. But I mean, you could put that in there because that's where you see the catharsis of the entire event.
Yeah,
her growth as an individual. So, for favorite scene, I just for whatever reason, I loved that initial meeting when Irving comes to the cafe and he keeps trying to give the game away, but Joe, spills a drink on him, kicks over his chair, trips, does all this stuff, and finally pulls him out into the hall. But just for whatever reason, that scene just works between the two of them. That kind of like tit for tat repartee that they just seemingly have going. It seems natural. And I don't know if that's more of an element of directing, acting, or editing, but there was something that worked for me in that one.
The answer to your question or your statement is yes. It's not one aspect. It's all three of them together.
Probably. It's usually a combination, but sometimes one influences a little bit more over the other. But when you have all of those points intersecting, it's possible that you just get the best out of all of it. So, what was your favorite scene then?
I like the opening scene with her at the ball in the shoe, because I think it set the tone of what the film was about and why it was taking place. She was young and naive and she was longing for something she couldn't have.
Okay. So most indelible moment. It's for me. It's the one that you see on every like old movie classic montage. Oh, and if there's one scene that they include out of any of these that's ever in that, it's the Mouth of Truth, where he fakes losing his hand. Like, that's the only one I've ever seen, because it's got a certain element of physical humor to it that's quick and easy to be able to use in something that's usually like if you have a musical overlay or something that you can be able to do. But that scene does work because, you know, he pulls a fast one, obviously, by, you know, my hand's missing or whatever else. But what do you think is the most indelible moment?
Actually, it's probably the scene where they're riding through Rome on the scooter. In fact, there are clubs both in Italy and in the United States, and I cannot remember the name of those scooters.
It's a Vespa.
A Vespa, that's it. There are Vespa clubs. A vintage Vespa can sell for $10,000 to $15,000 in good shape.
Yeah,
And
I mean, that is a classic staple of. Yeah, I mean, you watch any anything that goes on in Italy or like Rome or whatever else during this period, or even modern. Like, I remember scenes from Master of None where he's riding one around or whatever else. That's a fairly common Italian trope of this. I buy that because it was on the cover of a lot of the things that or the cover of this movie on like streaming or the poster, whatever it was. So all right, that's probably a good place to just cut quickly for our sponsor. We'll be right back. And we're back. All right, so best line. I don't think this was a particularly great movie for lines per se. There were a couple of them, but the dialogue is more full as opposed to quippy. So, but all right. So first nominee I had Rome. I will cherish my visit here in memory as long as I live. It's probably the emotional climax for the movie. So, early on in the movie, with her maid, or I guess it was a countess or something, but Princess Anne, why can't I sleep in pajamas? Countess Veriberg, pajamas? Just the top part. Did you know that there are people who sleep with absolutely nothing on at all? I rejoice to say I do not. Princess Anne, the farewell scene. I have to leave you now. I'm going to that corner there and turn. You must stay in the car and drive away. Promise not to watch me go beyond the corner. Just drive away and leave me as I leave you. All right? I don't know how to say goodbye. I can't think of any words. Don't try.
Okay.
And I have two more. Joe Bradley. Irving, am I glad to see you? Irving, why? Did you forget your wallet?
Okay.
Final one. Joe, you should always wear my clothes. Princess Anne, it seems I do. Which is my nominee for funniest line.
Yeah.
Did you have any others that stuck out?
What was the line that he said that he at the very end that he's basically acknowledging that he's going to keep everything to himself?
I don't remember that one.
Because at the end he says, "Your Highness can be assured that
trust has been placed," or something to that effect.
Yeah.
I think you can look that one up. I did see that one a little bit in the research, but that wasn't the final line, so that's why you had me confused. So, okay. Is that your nominee for best line?
Yes, because it really kind of lets her know that her memories can be kept, that she doesn't have to try to hide from those, that she can keep those, that special few days locked away in her heart and her memory and not have to worry about it coming back to haunt her.
Oh, here. May I say, speaking for my own press service, we believe your highness's faith will not be unjustified.
Yeah.
And did you have an honorable mention?
I do like the whole thing with the exchange. I'm glad to see you. Would you forget your wallet? Yeah, that was a good one.
Is that your nominee for funniest?
Yeah, because it's not like there are a lot of rib ticklers here.
No, I mean, there were some cute lines here and there, but I think it was more of the overall, but...
Yeah, it's not, you get a bowl of soup with that hat? Funny, but...
Okay, but that's a much different movie that we haven't touched it yet, so...
I'm waiting for that.
All right. So, ready for the grading?
Sure.
All right. So, first one up, Legacy.
I had a 7.5.
That's exactly what I had, but what's your argument for that?
It is a film that everybody knows about. Very few have actually seen the whole thing. And very few actually go and put it on their list of things where they go, yeah, it's one of my favorite films. And so it's out there, and it's a good film, and it's well regarded, but it just doesn't have legs of its own.
Honestly, I think the biggest portion of this, and I would tend to agree with you. In fact, because of that, I might even grade it down. But the major impact of this has to do with who was in it and what happened after the fact. The fact that Dalton Trumbo won his only Oscar for this movie, but it was in retrospect, well after the fact, because he couldn't accept it himself, and they basically posed somebody else as the real author at the time. So, there's a missed opportunity, and I don't know if rewarding this film should be part of it. That being said, you think of a conglomerate of talent of all of these people that got together and made an excellently well done film that just kind of doesn't get its due. It's kind of, unfortunately, probably underrated in that regard, but that's kind of why we've been doing the podcast as we do. I mean, one of our top rated movies is still Groundhog Day on the list. We're trying to reach out to genres that don't necessarily get the same level of acclaim, and maybe break the barrier of the cemented top 10 that seems to be everybody's top 10 all the time.
This is going to be one of those films that you're going to ask the cinemaphiles to rank their top 25 films of all time, and then give us 10 more that are honorable mention. You're going to find this film on the honorable mention probably as much as any other film, for that very reason.
I'd be curious to see if that experiment has happened, because I don't think that would necessarily be the case. But this falls in that weird category of the kind of romantic comedies that got some acclaim at the time, but don't have the same staying power. So something like The Philadelphia Story that, you have a cross with Cary Grant's in it, Jimmy Stewart, Katharine Hepburn, and it ends up winning a bunch of awards, but is that like ever appearing on anybody's top 100 list? I mean, the cross section of what is or isn't part of these great films of all time. I think we've gotten so stuck in certain films and against other films, and this notion that there are only like 4 or 5 of them that are the greatest movies of all time, and that's the exact reason why this exists. I want to be able to break it up because, I have very different or against the grain views on things like Citizen Kane or The Wizard of Oz by comparison to general critics. But I also think that there are underrated films that appear further down most lists that need to be boosted up, that I think are better than people have given.
And
or films that we haven't given a chance to, that never appeared on the list.
I know, and some of it's the fact that the films aren't watched. They don't have the don't have the following, so people don't watch them as much, and so they don't appreciate them. But I think you're going to see this because films, and this is where we talk about legacy, films change based on cultural norms. One thing that we're going to end up having to do right now, because of, and for those who may listen to this out of order, we're in the middle of the George Floyd protests. Everybody's now looking as to whether Gone with the Wind should be even considered worth watching anymore.
Well, I'm having a hard time. I've told you that, I'm in the middle of trying to watch all of the Best Picture winners and the AFI list, and it didn't appear in the most recent version, but the original version of the AFI list had Birth of a Nation as one of its top films, or at least in the top 100, and I'm going to struggle trying to watch that, let alone give it the same level of, I mean, it's an important film, but is it a great film? I think those are two different things. So I tend to agree that might be an overall struggle, but that's why we're putting things like classicness in this, where we can give certain movies or have different takes on them for what they were at the time, but also now, where they were at. Are they pushing the narrative? Are they doing something different? The other side of this, the amount of films that are probably going to appear on our list that weren't great films at the time they were made. Citizen Kane kind of was a flop. The Wizard of Oz and It's a Wonderful Life were flops. The Shawshank Redemption got awards recognition, but it didn't really get like a public viewing until it got on cable every weekend for like 20 years.
This is a good trivia question. When did The Wizard of Oz finally make back its production costs?
Probably in the 60s.
Well, it wasn't quite then. It was 1953. It was when one of the networks actually broadcast it as their movie of the week, and the payment they made finally gained enough money that paid off their costs, and they broke even finally. Took them 15 or 14 years.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, but we noted it last week, and
we're talking about it, and I refused for the longest time to watch Gone with the Wind because I always, being a historian and being somebody in tune with military history, was appalled and nauseated by the lost cause mentality. And, and today being the day that NASCAR announces they're going to ban anybody from using the Confederate flag at a NASCAR event. I mean, it's going to be tough, but that's why I'm only pointing this out, because as those films become more difficult to view and less popular because of the nature of the films and the subject matter, you're going to see films like this, which holds up. You could release that film today and it would have an audience because it's not dated at all.
If you put it in color, yes.
Yeah.
I don't think a modern audience, we know, you and I both know people that like have a problem with anything that's in black and white, and just the way it's presented. But that's a different thing entirely. But yes, this entire story, honestly, they could probably do a gross remake and it would probably be somewhat successful.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, I'm just was trying to think of some of the characters that could play in the more recent.
So first off, you'd have to have 3 very charismatic and younger people. I know that. So let's not break that. We can maybe say that remaining questions are the ending part of the podcast. But all right. So what did you have for impact or significance?
I had a 7.5 again. I think it has some significance and some staying power, but it's not overwhelming.
So the way that we have started to gravitate this towards is legacy is its overall impact over time, or like how it's remembered, and impact is more in the moment. And realistically, this movie had only one major piece other than, it was a highly recognized film, but it only had one major impact that I can think of. And it's basically to make Audrey Hepburn a star. Outside of that, I don't think it had a ton of effect. So I actually went a 6.
Okay, I could see that. I do know. Because I think it was the next year that Audrey Hepburn did Sabrina with Glenn Ford.
That's correct.
And, it kind of did launch her career more or less and put her on the map.
She won the Best Actress for this.
Yeah. For Gregory Peck, he'd been doing a great body of work up to then. He'd done Spellbound with Ingrid Bergman.
He'd done Gentleman's Agreement from 47, 48. That won Best Picture. I think he won Best Actor for it. Although his most famous role is the year after this, and that's To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah.
So, I guess, do we average that out to a 6.75 then?
6.5 is fine.
Okay. All right. What did you have for novelty?
I had wrestled with this because ultimately I thought this was almost the love you couldn't have. So there was a certain aspect of Romeo and Juliet. There was a certain aspect of longing for a life in the free world, which was, I even pointed that out while we were watching it. This seemed to have an element of Prince and the Pauper. So novelty, it was a good film, but novelty, I had it as 6.5.
Okay. I actually went the opposite way. I have a little bit higher. I have it as an 8. And it was simply because this is, romantic comedies were not as prevalent as they sometimes were, like during the 90s or 2000s or whatever else, where they were basically just pumping them out. But, and this one...
You had to have something for date night during that time frame.
Right. But this is a different type of romantic comedy, not only for its ending where, you don't get that, happy ending that you're expecting, but also that you're dealing with international relations and it's a foreign country movie. You're using a lot of other languages. There aren't a lot of the pop culture films kind of like this in the same regard. I might be willing to come down a little bit on that one, but I just, and again, I agree with you. This was a tough one to try and get because I don't think there's anything subject material wise that they embark on that's novel. And I don't think there's anything technical or conceptual that they're really doing differently. It's just, there are a couple of things that I can kind of hit on. But I you know what? I'll come down to about a 7. So that'll actually put it at a 6.75 between the two of us.
Okay.
I guess I can't even argue too much above 7 at that point. So it's just one of those things where you're trying to figure it out and you don't have a great answer. But so classicness, we've kind of already gone through a bit, but I gave it a straight 9. There's really nothing in this that, and honestly, I probably could have gone higher, but I didn't want to give it a full 10. But we already mentioned this could be basically re-released in color now and not have any problem. There's really nothing in here. They were a little risque at the time for kind of sexual innuendo, which I found interesting, but not over the top. So this would be a very basic PG-13 date movie. And yes. I think it would still be successful.
Yes.
So I gave it a 9. What did you have?
I had 8.5.
Okay.
So I'll go with your 9.
All right. I just couldn't find too many ways to really downgrade it. And usually classicness for me, I kind of start in that 10 to 9 area. And unless you have something egregious or there are some pieces that don't hold up or aren't consistent, I have a problem grading it too far down, which maybe, we would need to rethink the category at some point, but that's kind of where I'm at. So rewatchability, I probably could rewatch this film, but I don't think it's one that I feel compelled to go back to or to rewatch often. It's not one that if it's on, I'm like, oh, okay. But if somebody hasn't seen the film, you're introducing somebody to it, that would be a perfect opportunity where you're like, okay, this is a really good movie that you'll enjoy, and it's light, poppy fun. It goes in a direction at the end you aren't expecting. So I have a 7 for that. It's not something that I'm going to be just watching over and over and over again in the same way that I do certain movies, at least from where I'm drawn to, but it certainly is not an unwatchable rewatch.
I had 7.5, but I'll go with your 7.
Okay.
By the way, I just was thinking of actors who could do the film on modern times. The Princess and Margot Robbie.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And for
she's got the sex appeal and the intangibles that are there.
And the Eddie Albert, and I'm drawing a blank as to the character.
What's he in?
The character's name, Eddie Albert.
Oh, Irving?
Irving. Seth Rogen.
No, he's too old for the part, and he's kind of... No, I think you need somebody that's a little bit more charismatic. Even if it is a sidekick. Kind of in the way that in a movie you probably haven't seen yet, but it will eventually be covering, Swingers. The way Vince Vaughn is the wingman to Favreau in Swingers.
How about Ryan Reynolds to play the Gregory Peck part?
Yeah, I could buy that. I mean, you're getting two extremely charismatic people, and the thing I don't want, though, is for him to overplay it into the general sarcasm, and he works best when he's quippy. His best movies have always been where he's the sarcastic guy.
And if we're gonna go on, we're gonna stretch a little bit. How about the Irving part being played by Aziz Ansari?
Yeah, I could buy that. That actually would be a pretty good one.
I mean, can't you just picture him getting kicked over and him standing up with that nasally whine that he does in some of his things? Hey, what are you doing?
Yeah, I could definitely buy it. Honestly, that's a good call. That's a really good call. Because that satisfies some of your diversity play, as we're wont to do now, but Um, so, all right. So 9.3 for a total audience score. Adding into the general effect. So it comes out as a 46.05 as its final total. And let me just see where that fits in quickly. So that slots it in between Goodfellas and Slumdog Millionaire for our current number 10 slot.
That's probably about right.
Yeah, I so just a rundown of our current top 10. Number 10, Roman Holiday. 9, Goodfellas. 8, Raiders of the Lost Ark. 7, Taxi Driver. 6, Apocalypse Now. 5, Some Like It Hot. 4, Groundhog Day. 3, Pulp Fiction. 2, The Best Years of Our Lives. And number 1, Back to the Future. So,
okay.
Again, I think that one's going to require a revisit at some point. That we do. We're going to do a revisit every so often. We'll wait a little bit because I don't want to. I don't want to undercut that.
Skewed European.
Well, it's skewed super fan. And they enjoyed doing the podcast, so I was very glad to have them, and I'm glad that they enjoyed being able to talk about it. We always encourage people to have conversations about their favorite movies and be part of that, and that's another reason for doing this. But I don't think if you and I both critically went on that one that would be quite the same outcome.
Well, and I will say that I posted on my Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook the link for our podcast for the best years of our lives. And I had more response from people who I went to high school and college with than any other one I've posted, because they all are closet fans of the best years of our lives, for the very reason that so many of them have had family who came back from Vietnam, who came back from the Persian Gulf War, who came back from Iraq or Afghanistan, and they understand the film and appreciate it for what it was.
Yeah, I would tend to agree that it is very deserving of where we put it right now on the list. And I don't know if it's one that necessarily would be popping up on everybody's list where we currently have it. I certainly don't think the general population is putting, that film or Groundhog Day or Some Like It Hot, in their top 5. But, this has been a fun ride. And we haven't even covered some of the, tentpole greatest quote-unquote films so far. We haven't gotten to Star Wars. We haven't gotten to Gone with the Wind, Wizard of Oz, some of the other ones that are Lawrence of Arabia, any of the Godfather movies. But
Casablanca.
Yeah. So, but
it would be fascinating to take a group of 100 people, average people, cross section of America, and to show them what we finally rank as our 50 greatest films. They're going to be films that some of them have never seen, and just make each of them watch each film and then grade them. And my guess is that we'll end up with a list much different than any of the lists that have been compiled by the film or by the Academy or by any of the other groups that do these rankings.
No, I would definitely agree with you on that front. It has a certain, how to put it, different quality when it comes to that. Everybody's going to have a different opinion. But ultimately, I think with you and I doing the primary portion of this movie and doing what we are, first off, it is a privilege to be able to do this every week with you, and that you are willing to do it and take the time to watch these movies and take care of all of this. But there's a reason, I'm into cinema because you were into cinema, and you were into cinema because your dad was into cinema. And there's much like sports, there is a certain thing of where culture and art and themes are just passed generationally, and I'm just appreciating the fact that I get to do this every week. Whether or not anybody listens, like I'm enjoying. Please don't stop listening. Don't get me wrong, but I simply enjoy putting this together. And even if the list isn't something what everybody else will agree with, which is kind of the point anyway, I'm just enjoying the fact that it's our list and we put it together.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's one of the things. There were two things that my dad and I did together that were it, because you are old enough to remember my dad. My dad's been gone now for 13 years. And, you were old enough to remember the guy didn't say much. And so, I always called it bonding by osmosis. We either watched a film together or we watched sports together. And most of the time it was in silence. And, but I mean, we were 2 weeks ago, we did the Dirty Dozen, and I remember exactly where I was and where I was sitting and what chair I was in when I watched that for the first time with him. And it's not like I can remember that minute of details about something, but that I remember because he loved that film.
Yeah. I do think there is a special quality that we talk about, and I hope it's not sounding cliche, but the way I've always appreciated the way certain people talk, especially if they were kids, so like your generation, but the people that talk about going to Star Wars for the first time, like I was 5 and this extraordinary thing, and I've just there's a certain admiration when you're completely taken away by what's happening on screen. The two best cinema going experiences, we'll get to those in other films, and I will definitely tell, because my relationship to those movies is just so special to me. But the way you can lose yourself in that, I'm appreciative of that. And to a certain degree, on another note, I'm sad to see that we may not have the same era of movie going that we once had, where you get to be able to do that, where we're going to have more at home streaming, automatic stuff instead of being able to go to this. So, if that does come about, I think there is something that is lost with certain films, the spectacle of it that you're going to miss. But ultimately, it's a love of this medium that brings us here, and that I really appreciate being able to do.
Well, having your grandfather pick up my 75-inch TV from Best Buy this afternoon to put in the office, we're gonna be pretty soon pretty close to having a movie theater style screen by which to watch movies. So
when we get to the point where you can put me in the room with Brando doing The Godfather, I'll make him an offer he can't refuse. Then we've gotten to the pinnacle of cinema. Yeah. When I can be in the room.
But there's a certain quality of cinema that's so bizarre. It's a collective group of people all getting together in one room to have an individual experience.
That's extremely profound. Honestly, wow. That's a different thought. So,
well, on that note,
well, I wish we could talk longer, but I'm expecting a friend for dinner. thank you for everybody that's been supporting the podcast so far. Thank you to any of our guests. And please, as usual, rate, subscribe, review. We've got some exciting movies coming up. Next week, we're covering The Help from 2011, and we're following that up with a string of other notable films. So David Fincher's Zodiac, starring Jake Gyllenhaal and Robert Downey Jr., Silence of the Lambs, and then Steven Spielberg's second movie on the podcast, E.T. All of those are currently on Netflix, so if you want to watch those ahead of time to have that fresh in memory for listening to the podcast, we'd appreciate it. If anyone is interested in trying to get in contact with us, all the same normal methods. I'm TJ3 Duncan on Twitter, by email, or other mediums. So thanks, everybody. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week for The Help. After we scored it at number 5. So it's actually behind. Yes.
No.
Which I wouldn't have thought originally, but Back to the Future is still number 1. The Best Years of Our Lives is number 2, very, very slightly. Pulp Fiction 3, Groundhog Day 4, and then Silence of the Lambs. So this one comes in just ahead of Some Like It Hot.
Okay.
But not bad. Actually, this is episode number 21. I was mistaken earlier in the podcast saying that this was episode number 20.
Okay.
But not bad. I'll take it. So, all right. So, last pieces of housekeeping. We always encourage everybody. It's like Uber. Give us 5 stars. 4 stars will even do, so that other people can find the podcast, and we can keep going forward.
If you need to, I have some snack crackers in the back seat to get the 5 star.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Anyway, otherwise, we will be back again next week doing E.T. I have not set anything.
What does that stand for, by the way?
Extraterrestrial. It's part of the movie title.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. But after that, we have not yet decided our 3 remaining, or I guess 2 remaining episodes before we get to number 25, our big one yet. We have yet to announce that one as well. But
aren't we not going to announce it?
Well, if you'd like to.
Well, we could. There's nothing that prevents us. It's our show. I
will let you take that then.
Well, this is true comfort. This is mac and cheese to me. Probably one of my favorite westerns of all time, if not one of my favorite films of all time. Not for any reason in particular. It's Rio Bravo. John Wayne, Dean Martin, Ricky Nelson, Ward Bond, Walter Brennan.
And we'll get to it eventually on the episode. This one has a lot of intrinsic value to both you and I. And there are so many pieces, because you used to watch this movie all the time when I was a kid, and there are a lot of pieces where I just have very fond memories of watching this movie. So if anybody needs to find it, it is on the new HBO Max. E.T. for next week is on Netflix, so you can find it there.
If you, by the way, we just found this out by happenstance. If you have Dish or
any cable provider,
where you pay to have HBO and Cinemax, or I think either one, you can get HBO Max streaming service by signing in through your internet satellite or cable provider.
Yes, they are doing away with HBO Go and rebranding HBO Now as services. HBO Now is going to be like just the HBO like reduced version of pay for stream. So, but those will still be or those are changing as we go forward. But HBO Max, I've found quite a few things already to try and watch and get through on some of my personal watching projects for that. So, otherwise, we will be back, like I said, next week. As always, I wish we could chat longer, but I'm expecting a friend for dinner. Thanks, everybody, and have a great week. Not something that, like, I'm opposed to revisiting either. So I gave it a 5. Just the basic straight middle of the road.
4. I'd have to be in the right frame of mind.
Understandable. I like, this is a tougher subject because of, you know, the murders and other things that are going on in this. So, Sarah?
I'm going to skew and go up and go with a 7. Just because of what I actually enjoy. I mean, I do really enjoy true crime, and I go out of my way to watch, you know, the Ted Bundy documentaries and stuff like this, so.
All right.
It's going to be Mike Myers. I married a serial killer.
No.
Wasn't it I married an axe murderer?
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah.
You can't get any names of anything
comedy, wasn't it?
right tonight.
Yes, I can, Henry.
I don't even understand that reference, so okay. But I'd have to look back through as to see some of our audience scores, but I think this was probably one of our lowest ones. It had a 77 for a 7.7 overall score on this. So just to recap, that was a 6.3 at Legacy, 3.5 at Impact Significance, 5.8 for Novelty, 7.7 for Classicness, 5.3 for Rewatchability, and 7.7 for Audience Score, for a grand total of, if you're counting at home, 36.3. So that puts it ahead of The Help, but just behind Inglourious Basterds. So, Sarah, you have now been on 2 of the podcasts that are the lowest on the list. How do you feel?
Well, if you would ever actually watch some really great silent films with me, that would change, but you refuse.
Because we don't want to completely lose the audience this early on.
Okay, if anybody who out there loves the movie as a cult classic silent film, Metropolis, please write Tom and tell him what an idiot he's being for refusing to watch it.
I haven't refused. I haven't gotten around to it yet.
Yeah.
Well, let's put it this way.
Since it was taken off of TCM.
If we get one person who writes us with the idea of watching Metropolis, other than Sarah, or somebody Sarah solicits to do it, I would be shocked. Shocked.
Like you're shocked to find gambling in this establishment?
Yes, that was where I was going, because, of course, that's one of the great lines of all time for Claude Rains. So, anyway, yes.
So, all right. That's going to at least cap off the regular portion of this episode for this week. And we're hoping that for next week, we already said earlier in the podcast that we were doing Silence of the Lambs, but we are hoping to have another guest star on for next week to help us with that one. So before we cut off, you had something you wanted to add in?
Yes, we're recording this on June 24th. 2020. And I'm just going to do a shout out because he never really ever had any recognition or any remembrance other than his immediate family. But today would have been my dad's 80th birthday. And considering that he's the reason I'm named this after a movie actor, and the fact that he was such a big cinema and movie guy and really kind of installed that in me, and ultimately is trickled down to you, I just thought that as part of this cast or web or this podcast that we should at least recognize that. So to that, I just make note of that because his name was Ronald Duncan, and this is probably the most notoriety he's gotten in his life, probably if more than a dozen people watch this or listen to this. And with that, I'll just close out and just beg everybody, please, if you smoke, stop. If you don't start.
Well said. Again, I think, ultimately this is somewhat of a testament to that legacy, and so it's fitting that you would add that in there. All right, all things considered, as far as housekeeping, we have Silence of the Lambs coming up, then followed by E.T. We have not decided a couple of the movies after that, but this is our 20th episode, which means our specialty episode for the 25th is coming up here in the next few weeks. We have yet to pick that one specifically, but I am hoping to not only have a good one, but to... I know they're trying to show the opinions of that time, but, it's not a movie about gay people. We're not doing Milk. So why throw that in there? Other than you're doing it for comedic effect, at which point it loses any meaning anyway.
Yeah, no, Tate Taylor was is gay. Has been in a long-term relationship with a producer in Hollywood. So I don't know. Apparently he didn't have a problem with some of the jokes, or I don't know. But
well, I know that we're in a different place where these jokes were much more commonplace. And again, this movie happened before the national tone had even changed on being LGBT friendly, let alone in the way that we're currently on. I mean, we're a couple of days removed from employment protection decisions, and a few years removed even from basically the complete opinion flip on gay marriage. But even so, it just I didn't think this would age as poorly as it did. So what did you have? I had a 2.
I had a 4. I have a very difficult time. I mean, I reserve my right to give 2s